the internet and the lighting and the Internet of Things. There's 10 minutes and I'm conscious that most of you are not lighting people and you don't really care much about it. So I'll try and compress what is a standard presentation, if you haven't known, into a few simple points. First, we'll need to figure out what LifI is. Has anybody heard of the term before? Wow, okay, all right. So we're getting somewhere, I guess. That's a positive thing. So LifI is sending data using visible light. Principally, it's a term that was coined by Professor Haas from the University of Edinburgh, and it means specifically high-speed, bidirectional, networked, and mobile wireless communications using light. Everything that we've come to be used to with Wi-Fi, 3G, 4G, just delivered through light. It is a complementary solution to existing radio frequency techniques, and it is not going to replace Wi-Fi. Despite what you read, it's going to complement it, and it's going to be in the use cases that make sense the most in a stage-wise fashion. 4G didn't replace 3G, Wi-Fi didn't replace 4G. Radio technologies add to each other. And okay, fine, 70% of all wireless communications might be coming from indoors. And yes, 99% of the time where there's humans, there's light. So chances are LiFi is going to be a big thing, but it's not going to replace it because there's going to be some devices somewhere that are going to be much more efficient using RF. Fact. And that's fine. That's okay. So this is the kind of idea. You go from this general big base station to your Wi-Fi, which your phone does today, right? My phone does it. Automatically switches from 3G, 4G into Wi-Fi whenever it's available. And so in the future, you'll just have the same thing with the lights. So our company was co-founded by Professor Haas after his TED Talk during, I think 2011 it was, July. We've launched 2 products. The first one is aptly named the LifeI. It was high-speed point-to-point, but it was really tethered and a bit bulky. The cool thing is that it wasn't just point-to-point using light, but it was using off-the-shelf LED luminaires. And this is kind of a big thing when it comes to how you actually introduce this technology to the market and why would lighting companies be interested in it. What we have here is the Live Flame, and that's what we launched at the end of last year. And we have we had a live demonstration and installation during Mobile World Congress, for those of you that know. And I'll be happy to have a chat with anybody following this during the coffee break or anything and show you the video of how it actually looks in action. We've stopped putting up the names of the press because now it's becoming untangible or intractable. So instead we're putting in the partner relationships that we have established that we're allowed to disclose. Suffice it to say, we're growing an ecosystem of partners in various different markets that will help us address different use cases. Light is everywhere. Doing that alone is impossible. So we need people to take this technology that know what the problem is within that market and bring it to us. So why should you use light? It's significantly more secure because light doesn't go through opaque objects, right? A Wi-Fi access point here, guaranteed, goes outside of the walls of this room. Guaranteed. This light, if you can see it from outside of that door, you're lucky. And that light over there, you probably can't see. So it's very, very well confined. It's very well defined and very controllable. And people like control, huh? We've come to learn that. That's the whole thing about security. People like to control things. It's safe. It's intrinsic. Everywhere we have light, and yet nothing bad seems to happen, right? We know it. It's been proven. We're genetically evolved to be safe using light. It's very localized. Every single one of these lights covers a small area, and that gives you the opportunity to really provide precise and reliable indoor positioning. And that's going to be a very, very big thing moving forward. I'm sure some of you may have seen on BBC Tech that Philips recently launched location-based services using VLC. This is the early days of this type of technology and how it's getting introduced. And lastly, the data density aspect is massive. So if you think about the Internet of Things, if you think about connectivity, wearables, this is a massive explosion of data demands. We're talking about a 70% year-on-year increase in data consumption worldwide. It's unsustainable using current technologies. So light as a service is this new business model that the entire lighting industry is looking at. And the idea is that we're no longer interested in selling you light bulbs. And anybody that's selling devices is learning very, very quickly that it's all about the services that are wrapped around it. It's no longer about the physical devices. China has made them very cheap, and it's a very challenging thing to do. LEDs also have this added advantage of lasting for about 50,000 hours, some will say. Regardless, they last for 5, 10, 20 years, depending on how you use them. That's a massive, massive thing. The old business models just break down completely when you start getting this into play. And so, some of the features of LEDs, they're extremely long lifetimes, they're extremely energy efficient. The entire business model has moved from, I'm going to buy the lights from you in one outright go, and then I'm going to maintain them myself, to companies coming out and saying, listen, University of Edinburgh, don't worry about your lighting system, we'll do it for you. You'll just keep paying your energy bill, and I'm going to make my money back from the energy savings. That's how efficient these LEDs are. And that ROI is anywhere between 12 to 36 to 48 months to, it really depends who you speak to, but it's relatively steady. And this is everywhere. Differentiation in this field is extremely difficult. So what do people do? They use lights to provide added services. For example, occupancy sensors, you have controllable lights, dimming. They're starting to introduce circadian rhythms of how humans behave when you're under blue light, under red light, warmer, darker, all of these great things. But the new thing that what we really care about here is this smart sensor integration. Lights are in the middle of every single office building, every single room. There are multiple of them. They have power to them all the time whenever there's something interesting happening. Lighting is becoming the hub for the IoT. So you'll see that there's going to be a lot more lighting solutions being provided that offer these hub-like capabilities to link your Bluetooth, your Wi-Fi, your Zigbee-enabled devices. That might be the thermostat, that might be the access controls on your door, that might be all of these different wearable devices that we have. Link them to the one thing that is very, very well exposed, that's there anyway, that has to be there, that's powered, that has the ability to talk to everything. This is where the next thing is going. So what LEDs have really meant for the lighting industry is they've moved everything from volume sales onto a quality of service. It's now a competition of who can provide the best facilities, who is the closest to the customer, who can figure out what the customer really wants. And therefore, the large economies of scale have gone out the window to an extent, because the customer is the primary focus, and the business model on the LEDs is extremely well understood. So the future is services, building management services, smart cities, and so on. And the important thing to note is that this is a trend from Harvard Business Review. They showed it. The important thing is to see how the saturation goes. And you'll see the length of time that it takes for a technology between introduction to saturation. It's decreasing. Actually, the important thing to note is that it's decreasing exponentially. So while back in the day, a single company could be doing one thing very well for a decade or more, today, that cycle is about 3 to 5 years. Companies that don't innovate with a 3 to 5 year cycle quickly become extinct. Kodak, anybody? Right? Famous company. Nokia, they used to make phones, right? Last I remember, they don't make those anymore. It's innovation, it's innovation, it's innovation, and it's becoming quicker and quicker and quicker. And a lot of the apps that are being introduced here, a lot of the wearables that are being discussed here, 3 to 5 years down the road, they'll be reality. And we're going to need to innovate again and again and again. It's creativity that drives all of this. And so, with that in mind, we're looking at this exponential increase in data demands and services. And there's two trends. There's this exponential growth in data demand, and then there's this saturation, effectively, from our current approaching the theoretical understanding that we have about wireless communications. And so these two trends don't match, and they're not going to match. So this is what LifI means. As the telecommunication industry is introducing services and entering everything, including the IoT, the lighting industry has to introduce services, and it starts entering the telecommunications industry. And LifI is this catalyst that sits in the middle between these two giant streams that we're looking to exploit, because it allows lighting providers to use a completely new side of the spectrum. It's all about creating and optimizing this business metric. So The new opportunities are all about collaboration. It's all about whether lighting companies are going to end up collaborating with infrastructure providers like BT or Vodafone, the content providers, lest we forget. And the reason why? It's the same optimization metric. It's how much money can I make out of the data that I have that's coursing through my veins. That's it. That's the bottom line. And all your services are based around that. How much data can I collect? How can I process it in an intelligent way? And how can I extract the most value from it? It is dollars per bit. And in this business model, telecoms, content, infrastructure providers, backbone, lighting, it all becomes a giant mesh. That's a very, very important thing for anybody that wants to continue being relevant in the next decade, let's say. It is dollars per bit. So there's also an opportunities for lights to provide turnkey solutions. So you can come in, you can outkit everything, and you can provide data communications. And this is really the unification of lights and communications. So here comes the IoT. You need it to be low powered, you need it to be extremely secure, you need it to be localized, and you need it to be trustworthy, shall we say. Security is a massive part of the IoT. Personally, we've spoken with a number of corporations that don't use their full capabilities. They don't have this process optimization because they don't trust it. They don't know where the data is going. They don't know who's doing what with it. Everybody claims you have these great security gurus. And today you find out that actually the router that's in the rooms and all of your VPN networks that were going through to the user to allow them home offices, yeah, all of that is corrupted now. So what happens? For you and for me, for Facebook, big deal. I change my password, I update my root, I'm done. For a giant corporate, I was at a counterterrorism expo in London maybe 2 months back. And one of the key points to note there was how cybersecurity had influenced a $20 billion 10-year nuclear power building tender. Proof. A French company was supposed to get it. Last minute bid. 2 minutes before the deadline closed. Think about it. 2 minutes before the deadline of a tender closes. Nobody submits a $20 billion tender within 2 minutes before it closes, okay? Nobody does this. But they did it. And they did it because they knew what's happening. And they got the tender. Turns out there was a tiny little worm in a tiny little machine that was very, very, very specifically targeted. Because it won them $20 billion. Security is going to be absolutely imperative in this whole IoT space. And anybody that doesn't agree, let's see how things pan out. So what's new with LifI, and why would it be cool to use it? Not only does it give you this ability to provide location-dependent security. So in general, security protocols are threefold. The first is something that I know. The second is something that I have. And based on these two dimensions, there are many, many different cybersecurity protocols built. What LifI introduces is this third ability to be somewhere that I am. So you bring this physical presence, this physical location, you bring it into the fold. So anyway, LifI would also provide you this ability to have energy harvesting. So you can think about using photovoltaic cells as receivers, which makes it very cool because all of a sudden you have devices that can receive the data on the same piece of area, let's say, and as communications. So in the spirit of wrapping up, we are providing enlightened communications in every single bulb in the world and every single device in the world. And that's a prototype silicon that we're building. So if you have any questions, I'm guessing after the...
I think we're a little bit out of time there.
Yep.
But thank you
All right.
so much. That is absolutely fascinating.
Thank you for your questions.
Thank you.